He said, everyone's entitled to be treated with dignity. And that's what the labor union is all about, dignity. Provides dignity for people.
The president sharing a quote from his father about labor unions. Coming up, we'll break down the Protecting the Right to Organize Act on a special edition of Activate Live.
Activate your voice. Activa tu voz. Activate it now.
Speak up. Speak out.
Get involved. Get involved.
Engage-toi.
Take action.
Aktiviere deine Stimme.
We're union and we're proud.
Welcome to this special edition of Activate Live, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month, which begins today, along with Yom Kippur. I'm Tanya Hutchins with the Machinists Union. Today, we're breaking down the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, better known as the PRO Act, as part of our month of labor. Why talk about labor for just one day when it can be an entire month? Now, you may have seen IAM General Vice President Gary Allen's op-ed in the Arizona Capitol Times urging the state senators to co-sponsor the PRO Act because it will remove the many obstacles keeping workers from their right to join unions. Our guest today is IAM Organizing Director Vinny Addeo, who has been with the union since 1980 and Director of Organizing since 2018. Thanks for being here physically distanced, Vinny.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tanya. Again, thank you always for inviting me on this Activate Live show to contribute any way I can. But before I start, I just want to, I'd like to thank the Communications Department, your Director Battaglia, Assistant Director Adams, yourself, and your entire team for the professional support that you provide the organizing department to help us be more effective in our organizing efforts. So I want to extend my thanks to the Communications Department. You guys are unbelievable in the help that you give our department. So I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that. On top of that, before we get started, I am proud to say that the organizing department has 4 elections on the board for us right now. It's the first time since I took over as the director of the department that we have 4 active elections, which can amount to approximately 1,000 members. So we're excited about that. Again, these are just campaigns that are driven and run by the organizing department. We also have additional elections throughout the territories, but I'm just proud of our team in the organized department. They're knocking it out of the park, and we're excited about these upcoming elections.
Well, congratulations. We hope they all go well.
Thank you.
Well, you traveled the country talking to members about the PRO Act. In a nutshell, what do you initially tell them that it is? Because we get calls from members.
First of all, it's our job in the union to educate not only our members, but the public on what this legislation is.
Do you feel like they know what it is?
No, okay. I don't. And that's why I very rarely use the acronym, the PRO Act. I try to spell it out and say it out, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. As a matter of fact, it was just renamed the Richard L. Trumka Protecting the Right to Organize Act in memory of our president of our deceased member of our president of AFL-CIO, who was a great leader for us in the labor movement. But anyway, we need to educate people on what this legislation is, because if you went to any random person and said, yeah, we want you to support the PRO Act, they have no idea what that is. So we need to explain to them what this is. And I could go back to when President Obama was in office in his first 2 years. You know, we had the Employee Free Choice Act, which is another important legislation to enhance the current National Labor Relations Act. And I believe we fell short on that. You know, we kept using the acronym EFCA, 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 instead of saying the Employee Free Choice Act and what it meant. So it's our job to educate the public and educate our members on what the Protecting the Right to Organize Act is.
So to spell it out and just tell them what it is.
Exactly.
Okay, let me give you some statistics that the AFL-CIO recently shared so we can tell people how people feel about it already, and then we'll break it all down.
Okay.
So these statistics that we have to share, the AFL-CIO shared that 68% of U.S. adults approve of labor unions. And that goes along with a stat that was mentioned in Gary Allen's op-ed from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, showing that more than 60 million Americans would vote to join a union today if given the opportunity. And Vinny, you can jump in at any time, but they also shared that 61% of voters support the PRO Act. You know, people who are voting every day in elections or every year in elections. And when you look at that support, the higher support is coming from people of color and younger voters. So if you break it down, you can see all of the statistics there. Also, when you look at the support over the past 6 months, that support remains consistent. So let's break it down in terms of what this act is. Why is this needed, Vinny?
Well, before I elaborate on that, you're proving a point here by providing statistics. I'm going to add an additional statistic. With all that being said, and actually 48% of people said they would join a union tomorrow if they had the chance to. But look at where we stand, 6.8% union density in the private sector. So the numbers don't add up. So what does that tell you? We do not have free and fair elections under the National Labor Relations Act, and that's the purpose of this Protecting the Right to Organize Act legislation, and how it's going to level the playing field for workers who are trying to exercise their rights under the National Labor Relations Act.
So that is key, free and fair elections. Now, that's something that you start out talking about when you go around the country to talk to a lot of our members in the United States. So here we have another graphic. When you talk about free and fair elections, when is it not fair? Like, what's happening out there?
Well, as new President Liz Shuler stated the other day at the White House when she was with President Biden, President Biden invited all the labor leaders into the White House, and he told them, this is your house. So, and a comment she made caught my eye. It said, under today's laws, it's easier to stop a union than it is to organize one. And the reason is for that is the company's anti-union campaigns that they run. And this legislation will change those ability for the companies to run these captive audience meetings, all these, the threats of intimidation, coercion, people afraid to lose their jobs. This is going to be eliminated on this Protecting the Right to Organize Act.
Tell the workers out there who are not union members what a captive audience meeting is. Because I know I've been in jobs in the past where, my boss has called me into the office and said, well, I just want you to hear my side. But then you feel like you're being called into the principal's office.
Yes, so, I use a lot of sports analogies. I'm a big sports fan, so I believe any organizing campaign that we engage in, we're starting, I'll use football for an example. We're starting the game down 4 touchdowns already when the game starts, right? And that's because the laws are stacked against us to have free and fair elections. Captive audience meeting, to be quite simple, is just picture yourself every day coming to work, and before you start your work day, you have to sit in a mandatory meeting with hired anti-union consultants who are professionals hired by the company, spend millions of dollars on these anti-union consultants, instead of giving their employees what their fair wages and benefits. And then these people portray the union as in a negative light to the workers, and they have to listen to this every day. As recent as the recent Amazon campaign, which caught national spotlight down in Bessemer, Alabama, some of the things that were in the captive audience meetings and the anti-union campaign was every day when an employee came in, punched into Amazon, they had to go on a laptop and read and watch a video, an anti-union video, telling them how bad the union is going to be for them, how they're going to lose what they have. They also had managers going around the floor of the Amazon warehouses with giant TV screens, with constant anti-union messaging on these screens piped through their speakers. So as the workers are working, not only have to attend the captive audience meeting, and then it's ongoing throughout the day. And if somebody spoke up during this captive audience meeting, they were pulled to the side and reprimanded for it. So
this act would hold these companies accountable
for
doing things like this.
I'm sorry. The first thing it does is it bans captive audience meetings. So that takes that right out of the equation. Okay? It imposes real fines on the employers. So right now, if an employer violates the National Labor Relations Act under Section 8, what happens is the company is, if they're proven that they violated, they have to do a posting in the workplace to say, we will not do this again. And that's the punishment. Well, under the PRO Act, what it does is imposes fines, monetary fines against these companies, up to $50,000 for each unfair labor practice that the company commits, and up to $100,000 for unjust terminations to employees who were fired for exercising their right under the act.
So they'll feel that.
On top of that, managers and supervisors, there's pathways for to file lawsuits specifically, personally against supervisors and managers who are part of the process to terminate someone unjustly. So these supervisors and managers are going to think twice about stepping over the line during an organizing campaign once this legislation is passed.
So these are real penalties that they will face, that they will really feel.
Instead of the slap on the wrist that they currently get. You know, do you think the company cares that they have to do a posting in a workplace for 90 days that nobody reads? No, of course not. So this will impose real penalties upon them and hopefully, you know, take that whole atmosphere of fear away in the workplace when all workers are trying to do is exercise their right under federal law.
So this will put some teeth into it.
Absolutely, for sure. You know, in addition to, you know, I'm speaking today, you know, truly just from an organizing perspective. There's so many other aspects of the legislation that are very important to the labor movement, such as, you know, it bans permanent replacement workers during strikes. It also repeals the right to work for less laws. You know, right now we have more right to work states than none, right? And if no one knows what that is, it means that if you are protected by a collective bargaining agreement, you have a union, you do not have to be a member and pay dues. So it bans and repeals the right to work laws. And then it also permits secondary activity and boycotts and picketing for any type of group of workers who are exercising their right, and a boycott strike allows secondary boycotts and picketing to support that strike, which is something that we definitely need during these times.
So it sounds like this is really going in the right direction, and we're trying to, you know, get through the Senate. One of the things that I think that is incredible is that they can delay these elections, these union elections, for so long, and this would speed up the election process. And we actually have a campaign going on at Cascades Container Board in Niagara Falls, and there's a worker that we have a quote from that we can put up on the screen, and the worker is Sean Reed, and he says the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, legislation that passed the House of Representatives and is currently stalled in the Senate, would immediately jumpstart negotiations such as ours by providing first contract arbitration. How important is this?
Well, again, in organizing, the actually organizing campaign is not completed, realistically, from my perspective, until we reach a first contract, first collective bargaining agreement. Because, you know, getting the support from the workers, going through the anti-union campaign, overcoming, you know, this anti-union campaign is real. It's overwhelming for workers. You have to ask yourself sometimes, would you put yourself out there and jeopardize your job for the chance to have a union or the chance to support your coworkers who are trying to organize? You know, I don't take that for granted for 1 second, what these workers do. That's why we take this very seriously. But getting back to my original point, you know, after you win that election, it's such an overwhelming feeling of accomplishment because of all the hurdles and the roadblocks you had to go through to win that. And now you're left with trying to achieve a first contract. So there's a whole anti-union strategy just to delay that as well by the company side and their anti-union consultants who they pay millions of dollars to. And again, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act has language in there, incorporated into there, to grant 90-day arbitration and mediation for a first contract, mandatory, that will impose a 2-year contract onto the workers, which brings the company to the table in good faith and forces them to negotiate in good faith with the union.
Let me back it up a little bit when you go into like the voting process, because there are a number of ways that you can vote. You can vote in person, you know, you can vote by mail. Would this help to make it easier for the workers who are organizing to have different ways of voting as well?
Again, the currently, you know, in organizing, any delay, which the company strategy is always to delay, is in favor of the company. It gives the company more time to carry out their anti-union campaign to, again, insert fear and intimidation into the workplace. So time means a loss for us. So again, the legislation allows us to speed up the election process, divert these delay tactics by the company until after the election. It also allows the union to choose in which way, well, the workers per se, to choose which way they want to have an election. When they want to have it an in-person election where they go to an actual ballot box, or during a pandemic, the National Labor Relations Board has resorted to, because of the COVID-19, is to resort to mail ballot elections, which we've seen a lot in the last year and a half during the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are options for the workers to choose whether they choose to have a mail ballot election or an in-person election. And again, it gives choices to the workers to who the workers are the ones who choose to have a union or not the union and not the company. And this legislation gives these workers the support and the empowerment to get that done.
And if they've been doing mail ballot elections, it shows that it works, that they've been doing it.
For sure. The company usually opposes mail ballot elections, in my experience. They rather have in-person elections because what happens on the day of the election, they intimidate people to go vote. The people who they've intimidated to vote no, they make them go vote no on that day. Whereas a mail ballot election is a little different, right? We've seen, the statistics have shown that an average of 60 to 65% of the workers have been participating in a mail ballot election, and in contrast to in-person elections where it will be above 90%. Listen, we want as many people as possible to vote in the election. It should be representational across the entire workforce.
Yeah.
But as we see in our current political elections, that's not the case in the United States either, right? I think our average is in the 30 percentile for people who participate in local elections.
Can you think what it would be like if 100% of people participated?
Yes, the more the better. I mean, and the same thing. We feel the same way with the union elections. We want to make sure when the workers vote to support a union drive, it reflects the feeling of the entire workforce. Because if you have a split workforce, it's never going to work out. There's always going to be issues. So that's why it's important that we encourage as many people as possible to vote.
What else do you want them to know about the PRO Act?
Listen, this is definitely the most significant worker empowerment legislation we've had since 1935, when the National Labor Relations Act, the Wagner Act, was enacted. And we've had several amendments to the legislation over the years, but we need to take advantage of the opportunity we have right now. We have, and you showed a video at the outset of this, right? We have the most pro-union president and administration in the history of our country right now, representing our country. We have never heard a president come out and support unions, and using that really bad word, unions. In my lifetime, I've never heard of. Again, a lot of our political leaders use that safe terminology, labor movement, working families. No, President Biden says unions, and he supports unions. And he says not only should the National Labor Relations Act allow people to join unions, we should encourage people to join unions. Again, it's up to the workers to make that decision. But we need to take advantage of this point in time we have right now. We have the president, the administration, and we need to get this legislation passed to make free and fair elections for workers to join a union.
How can workers help?
Workers can help by contacting your United States senators. You know, this legislation has already passed in the House, and now it's going through the Senate. And you need to contact your senator if he's not supporting this legislation and say, hey, listen, this is in support of workers, union and non-union, to be able to exercise their free choice to join a union without threats and intimidation from companies.
You know, I'm hearing young people now are learning about that old movie, Norma Ray, where she stood up and she held up that sign in the factory saying union before she was tossed out. I'm getting hope from younger generations. Are you hearing that same thing?
Absolutely. The younger generation is in a whole different lane. They're progressive. They believe in equality. They believe in diversity, and they believe in people having free choices in their lives to choose what they want and what they don't want, how they want to live, what they want to belong to, and I think it's very encouraging.
Anything else you want to mention about the PRO Act? And because we get calls sometimes, especially from our union members who may not know that much about it, and they're saying, well, is this going to affect my union job? Like, how is this going to affect my job?
It virtually has no impact on workers who already have a union, other than some of those instances I mentioned earlier about banning replacement workers if the union ever decides, the workers ever choose to vote to go on strike. But it's more focused on people who are trying to join a union or form a union.
And hopefully this will give us more power at the bargaining table, when we have more members.
No doubt. Vice President Kamala Harris has established a White House task force for worker empowerment and organizing. And I've had the privilege being appointed by President Martinez, myself, and Director of a Legislative and Political Department, Hassan Solomon, and our Chief of Staff to the International President, Owen Hernstadt, to participate in real substantial meetings where the administration is soliciting from unions and leaders of unions on what changes we can make outside of legislation, just within the departments of the government, where we can make it easier to increase union membership and increase union density. And I've had the privilege of participating in these meetings and give feedback on ways that I know through my experience in organizing on how they can make it easier for us to allow workers the freedom of choice.
Well, thank you for using your voice. Thank you for coming in here and breaking it all down for us. We appreciate it, and we're hoping that everyone makes those calls, makes those emails, and visits their senators, because this should be good news for every worker if we can get this passed.
Absolutely.
As workers, if we as workers can get this
The
passed.
time has come. We need change, and this is a long way to change. And I'm just hoping we don't miss this opportunity. This, again, as I mentioned before, we have a key opportunity right now, and we got to take advantage of it.
All right, thank you so much for joining us,
It's
Vinny.
my pleasure.
That was Vinny Addeo, our IAM Organizing Director here at the Machinists Union. So what do you think about the PRO Act and its potential to change the face of workplace organizing? Activate your voice right here on this video, no matter which platform you're watching or when you're watching. We want to hear from you because you too can join the conversation even if you're watching the replay. Before we go, we'd like to wish Neffy a happy birthday on Friday. The National Federation of Federal Employees was founded in 1917. Support your union siblings. Spread the word about this video on your local or district page. And thanks for watching. We'll see you the next time we do a special edition of Activate Live.